Hi, I hope you're having a wonderful summer. I hope you have a little time to sleep in, drink a little extra coffee, and spend time with your family. Maybe just a little bit of professional reading on the side. I actually have a ton of books that I ordered, and I'm hoping to get through them all this summer. It's my Summer of Science of Reading bucket list, and I'm excited to share them with you so that maybe you can pick and choose which books you want to read this summer. Let's get started. My first book is Speech to Print by Dr. Louisa Moats. You might be familiar with this one because it's talked about so much. I've been wanting to read it for a long time, but because it's such a heavy read, I want to save it for when I really have time to devote to it. Dr. Louisa Moats understands that knowledgeable teachers create successful students, and she understands that educating our teachers is more important than just buying a program, because there's no perfect program. We have to have knowledgeable teachers. This book centers around the idea that, yes, we are wired to speak. Speaking comes quite naturally. Reading does not. So if we can utilize what we know about linguistics and speech and take our students from speech to print, meaning reading and writing, we can help our students be successful. But first, we have to understand all of those systems of language to help them get there. This book is going to dive into all of those systems of language, including phonology, orthography, morphology, semantics, syntax, pragmatics, all of those nuts and bolts of language. And if that sounds completely foreign to you, then you're definitely going to get a lot out of this book. I would recommend ordering the workbook so that will help your learning. And actually, I don't have the workbook, and I'm going to wait to dive into it deeper until I do have the workbook. Something else I want to point out, the last chapter is called Structured Language and Literacy Instruction, and it actually compares structured literacy, what we're moving to with the science of reading, to that typical literature workshop approach that we see in classrooms. So the next book that I want to recommend is Unlocking Literacy by Marcia Henry. I'm really excited about this book. If you're new to the science of reading, I would put this at the top of your list. This book is centered around just effective decoding and spelling instruction. So that's really good because often that is where the biggest disconnect in our classrooms is in our decoding or our word recognition and our spelling instruction. This book is going to go through spelling generalizations, how the English language, the history of it, how it came to be, why is it so crazy, and show you that it really isn't that crazy. The book also, what I love about it, it does include multisensory instruction, which we know is good for all students, and it includes sample lessons, resources for teachers, and a ton of word lists. So it not only tells you what you should do, but it actually gives you examples so you can put it into place right away. The other thing that it does is it actually walks you through different ages and what instruction should look like at each age. So it starts with that preschool and shows in the effective instruction at that age level, and then it moves all the way up to our competent readers. What do we do with competent readers? We still do word study. We show them morphology and Greek and Latin roots, and we grow them as readers, even as competent reader. If you need help with that decoding and encoding part of your instruction, this book I would highly recommend. My next recommendation is really more of a reference book than an actual textbook, and I like it because it's a great thing to put on your summer to-do list because you could get it done in a weekend. This is The ABCs and All Their Tricks by Margaret Bishop, and it is a reference book for phonics and spelling. So this would be a really good companion to Unlocking Literacy that I just talked about. Once you know the importance of encoding and decoding and what to do, this is going to give you a lot of word lists and what words are spelled that way. So I see a double F, and then it says the exceptions, and it tells kind of that spelling generalization or rule. And it has all of these in English, so you can see that English isn't crazy. It is pattern-based. There's something behind it. The great thing, too, is the first couple chapters are written for the teacher to give you a little bit more context, so you are reading something. You have something to read. And it goes through the basics of the phonemes. What sounds do we have in our letters, and how are those matched to letters? because we have fewer letters than we have sounds. So we have different things like digraphs and vowel teams, and it explains all of that language in a way that you can explain to your students to make them understand what they're doing when they're making a letter sound correspondence. I really like that it also includes some information on nasals, voice and unvoiced sounds, because when we give those clues to our students, especially our dyslexic students or our struggling students, it helps them be more successful. So this book helps you be more knowledgeable as a teacher and then gives you a reference as you're planning instruction throughout the year. The appendix also includes some things about syllable division and stress, which syllable is stressed, which matters when it comes to spelling, as well as morphology for your older students, 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade students. I don't know about you, but I love reading, but I don't always have the time. The next book recommendation I don't have in front of me because I have it on Audible. It's The Knowledge Gap by Natalie Wexler. The Knowledge Gap is very, very popular. If you have not had the time to read it, I highly recommend just getting it on Audible and listening to it because it's a really great one to listen to, or you can definitely order the book as well. In the Knowledge Gap, Natalie Wexler is focusing more on that language comprehension part of the simple view of reading and how that relates to reading comprehension. We know that within standardized tests, students are often asked to read a passage and find the main idea or some other skill-based strategy. So what we do in the classroom to prepare for these tests is we give them a passage and we practice doing things like finding the main idea. That is not a high-yield strategy and it does not create readers. And the biggest problem with it that we're finding is that there is no content learning. And when we don't understand vocabulary, when we don't understand depth of content, then we can't be successful readers. So this is what she really points out in this book, and it's really interesting to listen to. So I hope you have a chance to either read or listen to The Knowledge Gap this summer. My next recommendation is Reader Come Home. This is also available on Audible, but I highly, highly recommend you getting the print version just because of the subject matter. This is Reader Come Home by Marianne Wolf, the reading brain in a digital world. So it almost seems wrong to listen to this book on Audible, but go ahead if it's the only way you can access it. I love this in the time of COVID because this year we have put kids on screens more than ever before. And what Marianne Wolf does is explore what does that digital environment do to our reading brain. And it's really interesting because she points out the fact that we are reading more text than ever before in human history, but we are not deeply reading. We're scanning, we're scrolling, and we are not really deeply understanding or using that part of our brain at all. And it changes our reading brain. And what does it do to new readers who have never read deeply when we're putting them in front of a screen? It's such a compelling read, and I highly recommend it. I started it earlier this year, and I got about halfway through it, so I'm hoping this summer I can go back, refresh my memory, and have time to complete this book. My last recommendation is an oldie but goodie, Overcoming Dyslexia by Sally Shaywitz. I read this in my master's program. I still love this book. I still refer to it. If you have not read this book, I highly recommend it. It has a lot in the beginning about the science of the reading brain. The graphics are great. Although this is available on Audible, I'd recommend getting that paper copy so you have all those images to go with your book. It's going to talk about the reading brain. Remember that any of the strategies in here for dyslexic students are good for all struggling readers and all readers in general. It's a wonderful book to recommend to parents. I recommend having it in your library to pass out as needed to parents. And if you're a classroom teacher, you definitely need to read this book. I can't end this without an honorable mention. David Kilpatrick's Equipped for Reading Success. This was my summer read last summer, and you can see how much I loved it. It's all tabbed and well loved. The cover's not even on anymore. This book really goes over phonology, phonemic awareness. It has an assessment for phonemic awareness, as well as 1-minute drills in the back. It talks about orthographic mapping. A must read for the science of reading teacher. So, highly recommend it. Finally, I want to talk about a book that is not on my summer reading list that I actually did already read, and I want to caution you just in case it's on your summer reading list. The book is Shifting the Balance I'm sure you've heard of it. It's been pretty popular as of late. Jan Birkins and Carrie Yates are not researchers. They actually say at the end of the book they're not researchers, they're just educators. And it really shows because they do some things with the science of reading that don't fit with the science of reading. The first 4 chapters are really good. They're trying to make the point that we can just make a few tweaks to our balanced literacy instruction to make it effective. But really, we're shifting from a balanced literacy framework to a structured literacy framework. So not every teaching practice that we had was ineffective, but we really need to understand that we have to shift all the way. We can't just tweak our instruction. And while the first 4 chapters are pretty solid, chapters 5 and 6 are quite problematic. In chapter 5, they make the argument that cueing, meaning guessing based on picture, guessing based on meaning or initial letter, can still be an effective practice when combined with phonics. And they go so far as to try to fit that cueing strategy into the simple view of reading, which does not align with the science of reading research. Then they double down on what they say in chapter 5 and chapter 6 by making the claim that you should continue using predictable textbooks with sound spelling patterns that have not been introduced, because we're going to point out the phonics even though they haven't been explicitly taught, and then we'll just use the picture to check our work. That does not align with the science of reading. And the reason that that's problematic is because they are saying that is a way that we can help our students orthographically map words. But going back to David Kilpatrick's book, if you read about orthographic mapping, according to Linnea Airy or Dr. Kilpatrick, we know that students need to see and understand every sound spelling correspondence to truly orthographically map a word. If they do not have instruction in those sound spelling patterns and they're just memorizing it like the word people for a kindergartner, then we know that that is not true reading and it doesn't align with the science of reading. So it makes me very uncomfortable that this book continues to push those practices on teachers and say that they're okay when research says that they're not. So something to keep in mind. If you want to still read the book and look at the first 4 chapters, great, but please proceed with caution in chapters 5 and 6. Thanks for watching. I hope you got some good ideas of what you should read this summer, and check back with me and let me know what you read and what you liked.